Welcome back. You can see down here in the corner that my rapid rating is finally above 1200 after a couple of months. As many of you know, my rating tanked a couple of months ago when I started playing more games off camera. There are various possible explanations for that, but I do know one explanation for it getting back above 1200, and that's that I've worked really hard at it. In fact, a few days ago, I had a 12-game winning streak, as you can see here in my rapid archive. It's the longest winning streak I've ever had on chess.com. So I'm pretty proud of that. I don't have time to go through every single game and analyze all the mistakes and blunders that happened on both sides, but I am going to try to take a look at as many as I can and try to see the point at which I won the game. What my opponent should have played instead, what they did play, and why that helped me win. In the first of those 12 games, that's this one, I won by my opponent running out of time, but there was mate in one on the board. My opponent only had one legal move, and I was going to checkmate here on g2. But the point at which I won was way back here on move 37. It actually turned out to be a blunder for me to have pushed my king up in there, and now my opponent has an advantage. But before that, we were about even, and I should have played e5 here. And then I think it doesn't matter whether my opponent, which pawn that they took. I was going to be able to take either one of them, and then I would control the center with my bishop down there in the corner, cutting off those dark squares, and my king cutting off the light squares. But instead, I pushed my king up here, which allows my opponent to check me with their knight. And I think the reason that gives them an advantage is because I would be forced back. I could also go forward toward the knight, but if I do that, then they have this passed pawn right here that I can't stop. According to the engine, I might be able to take their knight, but that pawn's just going to keep on going. Obviously, I can't bring my bishop up here to stop that pawn because my bishop would just get taken. So even if I didn't go toward the knight and I went back, well, that allows them to take this pawn, and then they're controlling the center instead of me controlling the center. But they didn't check me with the knight to b3. They took this pawn, and when I take back, now I have full control of the center with my king and my pawns here, and their king and knight cannot come forward. And because of where my bishop is, it's cutting off, this entire really long diagonal, and I'm the one with the passed pawn that's going to be able to make it through eventually. Now, it didn't turn out to be that pawn that got through. That pawn eventually, got stuck because their king stayed in the way of it, but I was able to get the b pawn down, as you can see here, and I got it down fast enough that my opponent couldn't do anything about it. So yeah, it all came down to right here where they should have checked me instead of taking this pawn. Let's go on to the next game. In this game, my opponent resigned. I have a mate in 2 on the board. Although I had missed a mate in 1 a couple of moves earlier, if we back up to right here, I had checkmate here if I had just put my queen here on d5, because obviously my other queen is cutting off these squares. That queen would be protected by the bishop and, be cutting off all of these squares. That would have been checkmate. I missed it. I didn't go quite far enough, but, my opponent saw the writing on the wall here at this point. It doesn't matter which way they go. I'm going to have a checkmate in a few moves. But where it went wrong for them was way back on move 17. At this point, my opponent has a very small advantage according to Stockfish, but we're between +1 and -1. The engine says they could have played g6 here. They could have taken my bishop with this knight. And it says I would have taken back with the pawn, but I probably would have taken back with either the rook or the queen, or maybe even the knight. I'm not sure. I think the pawn taking back is the last piece I would have taken with, but that's what the engine says. There might be a few other moves they could have made, but I only have 2 showing here on Stockfish. But instead what my opponent played was pulling this bishop over here to kind of line up with this. And the reason is that I can get this knight out of the way of the bishop over here to f5, which attacks their queen and points my bishop at their undefended bishop. I didn't realize that's what put me ahead, but when I did play that, attacking their queen, I thought they were going to move the queen, but instead they played their best move, which is taking my bishop. And I'm in check now. And I almost came back here and took that with this knight, because I know that if I take with, my queen instead, they're just going to move their queen out of danger. But I liked my knight up there where it was, and so I took the bishop with my queen, and they played their best move, which was getting their queen out of danger and protecting this pawn, which I was also aiming at with my knight. And I was just ahead the rest of the game. Now this one seems more complicated than a lot of these because I didn't even play my best move here, but it's still about +1, but my opponent didn't play one of their top 2 moves here, which were g6 and taking my rook. Instead, they brought that knight back, and that put us up at +6, so it could be considered that this move is what won me the game, and the reason is that I can check here. I did see that, but I thought, they're not going to take because my rook's guarding that knight. They're just going to move their king, so I checked there, they moved their king, and my best move here was actually e5. But I felt like that would have gotten long and complicated. I just took a free pawn, and I'm still at +6. I'm only 1 pawn ahead, but I'm at +6, and I think it's because there's not much that they can do. I'm not even supposed to save that knight here. According to the engine, I'm supposed to play e5, attacking this knight, which is just going to move over here and attack my queen, but then I'll be able to take it with the knight, with the bishop. So yeah, it's kind of complicated, but instead I challenged that knight and they just moved out. I thought that they were going to take it and then I was going to be able to take here. I didn't know if I was ready to trade queens at that point after they got out of check, but I thought maybe I could pick up another pawn. But yeah, I was just up +6 or more the rest of the game because of that extra pawn that I was able to pick up over there. Let's go on to the next one. In this game, my opponent resigned after 23 moves. It's about +5 in my favor, and that's because they just gave up their rook. Right here, we were about even. We each have 2 rooks, a minor piece, and some clumped up, disorganized pawns here. I thought I actually had a very slight advantage here. For one thing, I was controlling an open file with my rook. One disadvantage is that I haven't developed my knight yet. And I was, working on how to develop the knight because I didn't want to, quit guarding this square here. They also have an advanced pawn. It's only 3 squares from promotion if they can get rid of my pawn, but that pawn is blocking their bishop. So yeah, I was having trouble evaluating this position, but they put their rook there to check me, and that kind of solved my problem of how to get the knight out, so I took that and they resigned. So that was, I guess, an elementary blunder. It's just, a straight up giveaway of a piece, and I don't think there was much point in playing on after that, although if I was them, I think I would have kept playing. They had plenty of time, forced me to checkmate them, but not everybody's into that. In this game, my opponent resigned after 22 moves. I'm up -6. And in this case, it may just be material. I'm up -6 because, I have 2 bishops. To a beginner, it might look like they can just take this bishop, but if they do, I'm going to checkmate them. So that bishop's not free right now. They have to, move one of their pawns, which is going to give me plenty of time to save my bishop by protecting it by a pawn or bringing it back here. There's, all kinds of things I can do with it. Now, in this one, my opponent went behind slowly. It didn't happen all at once. We're basically even back here at move 17. All right, I had initially misevaluated this one. I thought this was one of the ones where I went ahead slowly, but instead, no, it comes down to this one move right here. My opponent should have played f3, which protects the knight, or they could have played king to f1, but instead, I guess they thought this knight was defended. It's really not. That rook can't move right now because, then I would have checkmate. So they played c3, and I'm not sure what they thought would happen, but I got a free knight out of that, and so I'm up +5 now, and here they realized they can't take that bishop because, of course, I would have checkmate on the back rank after they went back to block and I took. So they did something even worse than what they probably should have done, which is h3 or a3. They gave up the bishop too. So I took it, and then they resigned. So that last part, the bishop, that was an elementary blunder, just giving up the piece for no reason, but back here they should have protected the knight. Or failing that, the reason that king to f1 works is because then when I take the knight and they take back, then when I check, their king gets out of check here and it's fine. It's not a checkmate. So they had to play one of those 2 moves. There might possibly be something else that I'm not seeing, but those 2 definitely work. But yeah, I'm going to call that an intermediate level blunder, but this giving up the bishop over here is an elementary level blunder. I don't even know why they played that move and then resigned instead of resigning before that. If they weren't going to resign before that, I might as well keep playing after this as well. I might end up stalemating them. In this next game, my opponent resigned. I had mate in 5 on the board. Although I had missed mate in 1 on the previous turn, I'm just going to back up and show you that. I shouldn't have taken the rook. I should have just checkmated them. I had checkmate right here. But I think I was moving too quickly and I just didn't see this checkmate. I obviously knew I didn't have this checkmate because their queen is guarding that square. But I thought, you know what? I could get their queen distracted out of there. If I take this rook, their queen would think, oh, I just gave up my queen for a rook. But because of where my rook is guarded by that pawn here, their king can't get away. And then I'm going to be able to checkmate them with my bishop knight and with the help of the rook. And so even after I play this, I do have a mate in 5. It's not even my opponent's best move to go take my queen. But even if they do, I have this bishop to c7. Then my opponent has to move down here. Then I have knight to b8. Then the king has to come closer. And then I have knight to c6. And then the king has to go back up or down. Either way, I have the rook that can come in and checkmate them. But where it went wrong for them was way back here. They're up +3, +3.6, and they have multiple moves that work. What they failed to see was that I was pointed down here with my queen. My opponent has just taken my rook. They're up 3 points of material at this point. They needed to bring their queen back to check me and then move over, to guard that H pawn. Or they could just play g3 now, and then I can't see down there. But instead, they saw another free thing here, and they took that free pawn, which that allows me to come down here, and I was ahead ever after that. My opponent couldn't come out this way, so they had to go toward the rook. I was able to check. When they came up, I picked up a pawn, and they're still ahead on material, but I was able to chase their king around the board because, they can't take this pawn, and if they go up here, they can't take this pawn, and when they go up here, they can't take this pawn because the bishop's guarding it, and so on. Plus, my queen is on one of, the longest diagonals of the board, so I can chase them down through there. So yeah, right here, I think they should have realized I just developed this bishop, It should have tipped them off that I was pointed at h2. In this game, I won by checkmate on move 28. I didn't realize it was checkmate, until I was letting go of the queen on that spot. And then I realized, oh, my rook's down here, cutting off this entire file. And of course, I knew my bishop was here, but I thought they would be able to come back out. And then I wasn't sure what I would do after that. But as soon as I dropped it, I saw my rook and realized I had checkmate. This one, my opponent went behind slowly. If I looked at this right, and it went all the way back here to about this point, my opponent is slightly ahead if they'll just take that bishop with their queen. And I think that's what I would have done, because if you do this, not only do you have doubled isolated pawns in the center, but you open up this diagonal toward your king, but they took that. Now I'm not even up -1 yet, and I didn't play my best move, but with each successive move, they made a slightly inferior move. Now I'm up -1. But as I said, they have those doubled isolated pawns there in the middle. They've opened up that diagonal with their king. I'm able to get a piece out. Not sure what they were worried about or why they did this, but they played h3, which gives me time to castle, and they still have, a bunch of pieces undeveloped. They did play one of their best moves here, and I'm not ahead any material yet. But just as we go through this, you can see that I'm, slowly gaining a larger and larger advantage. Even though they played their best move here, I'm up nearly -2, and the engine wants me to go ahead and take this pawn, which I'm not following that, so I didn't do it. But I did attack their queen, thinking maybe, they would abandon the defense of that pawn there. They came forward, which was a problem. Looks like they should have just gone back one. But if they had gone back one, then they would have given up the defense of this e-pawn that I was looking at earlier. And that's kind of what I was hoping. I didn't think they would just abandon that c2 pawn. So here I, went ahead a little bit. But first I attacked their queen. And then when their queen moved, I took the rook, and I'm up -4. So it looks like that was a big jump, but according to the computer evaluation, I've been up ever since they took, there with the wrong pawn, or with the pawn instead of the queen. In this one, I won by checkmate on move 49, and according to Stockfish, when I went through this game, it looks like I was ahead ever since move 6, because after I took here, they had just taken my knight with their bishop, and I took back, and we're even if they'll check here. It's an only move. And failing that, they should play g5 to protect this pawn over here. But instead, they just got a knight out, which it says I should play e5 now, but I thought they were going to take that. And then it says I would take, and they wouldn't take my queen. I'm not sure about that. And I didn't play my second best move either, which is to get the knight out to c3 here. I just took that free pawn, which is one of the reasons for moving the d-pawn in the first place in this Vienna opening. I guess it's not the Vienna since I didn't do this. This is the King's Gambit. I played that by accident. I was trying to play the Vienna. But anyway, I'm just up 1.8. Even though I'm not up any material. And I think a lot of it has to do, with me controlling all these center squares, having, a centralized bishop here. I'm prepared to castle. My opponent got a bishop out preparing to castle, but now I'm up plus 3.7 if I'll play e5 here. But again, I didn't play e5 here. I wanted to castle first. I played castle, so I'm only up 1.5. My opponent castled, but they shouldn't have, because now I'm up plus 3.7 again if I play e5. But now I did play e5 because now my queen's defended. I just now realized my queen was defended earlier too, so I shouldn't have been worried about the e5. Okay, well, I'm learning things from this too. But anyway, so here they take, I take, and they did that, which isn't great because I just move over. And now when they take my queen and I take back, their knight's still in trouble. It has to get out of the way. But look what's trapped down there in the corner. I just get that. So that worked out well for me. If I'm counting right, this is the 8th game that we're looking at. In this one, my opponent resigned when I had mate and 5 on the board. This is after 39 moves. But when I went through this game, it looks like my opponent went behind way back on move 16. Right here, I had just given up a piece. Before that, I was ahead a whole piece. And I had several moves. I'm up -4 already, but I took that pawn and then too late realized they could just take it. My opponent realized that even later and attacked it with the rook, which allowed me to save the bishop. And that was their last chance here because I remained a piece ahead for the rest of the game. So this, I'm going to say, was an elementary blunder here because I just gave up a piece for a pawn. Now, it was still very slightly ahead because I took a pawn, I guess. But yeah, I didn't see that queen over there. I think it would have made a lot more sense here. It says to play a5. I was going to say a6, but it also says g6 would be okay. And I think maybe that's because I have, both my bishop and my queen on dark squares, so I can continue to guard g7. And they have a light squared bishop, which can't get in through the dark squares. So, okay. I was trying to figure out a way to get this knight out. That was one of my problems here. And maybe that's why it's saying a5. Yeah, I guess if I go a5, it says they'll take it. And if they do, then of course I could take it with either my bishop or my rook. And then I would be able to get the knight out this way. Because I can't get it out over here right now because of where their queen is. But yeah, this was an elementary level blunder on my part and an elementary level blunder on my opponent's part for not seeing it. But that's where the game went in my favor permanently. In this ninth game, my opponent resigned with mate and 5 on the board on move 20. As you can see, I'm already up 14 points of material, and this one started to go bad for them really early, way back here on move 5. They have a couple of different choices. They can play bishop to b6, they can castle, there might be other choices as well, but instead they hopped in here with their knight, and I thought, well, are they going for that? Because, I mean, that's the obvious thing, right? It looks like they're either trying to check me, a protected jack, or they're trying to fork my queen and rook. But this is a problem with a lot of people at my level. I'm playing at a level low enough that there are a lot of people that get 2 pieces out and try to do some devastating attack with it instead of developing. I already have 3 pieces out, and now I can take full control of the center. I guess my opponent didn't anticipate that. So when I played d4, well, they can't do the fork now because I would just take it, and their bishop's hanging. So they have to move their bishop, and the knight's not really pinned because I can castle, which was the point of getting some of those pieces out. So when I castle, I'm up 2.4, even though I'm not up any material. My opponent is up a pawn because they took this pawn here. But I think it's fairly obvious why I'm ahead according to Stockfish, because again, I'm controlling all these center squares. I have knights guarding, multiple squares across the border there. I have this bishop that's controlling a lot of territory around the board, and their pieces are fairly ineffectual here. But they made it worse. I think if my opponent had castled here or continued to develop other pieces and pawns, they might have been okay, because I wasn't sure I was up, that much here. I thought I was up just a little bit, maybe +1. But instead, my opponent gave away the knight here, which is just elementary. So I took it, and now I'm up +4, even though I'm only up 1 point of material, because now they're missing a whole piece. I'm probably about to get that F pawn, and they've only got a bishop out. And when I take the F pawn, then I'll have all my minor pieces out. So yeah, this one fell apart for them pretty quickly. In this, the 10th game, my opponent resigned here. I think it's because they realized they weren't going to be able to stop this pawn, right? If they come toward it with their king at this point, then I'm going to promote. It's protected by the rook. If they try to bring the rook down at this point, I'm going to promote. They'll have to take it, and then I'll get their rook. So either way, I'm going to end up with an extra major piece. And I've been up a handful of pawns for a while in this game. It looks like my opponent went behind after move 17. Right here, after I took a rook of theirs, we're dead even according to Stockfish, but only if they play bishop to f6. Now this one's difficult. That seems very advanced to me. I cannot fault my opponent at all for not seeing that. Now I thought I was already ahead here because not only was I up a pawn, but I had this, cluster of pawns here in the center. Look at the number of squares these pawns are defending from where they are. And, that one's defended by the pawn behind it. And I have a knight looking at this. Also, my queen's looking at that. So that kind of locks their knight and their rook into defending their e-pawn. I thought I was already up maybe +1 here, but my opponent had to find this, and I don't know what that does. If any of you know what that does, let me know. It says I wouldn't take it, which I think I understand, because then when they could take it back, they could check me. Well, they couldn't check me immediately while my pawn is there, but it says I would play h6 then. But why wouldn't I take it? No, it says at this point I would play h6. It's my only move. If they had played that, I don't think I would have played h6. I would have possibly lost this game. But then later I probably would have assumed, after looking at this, that they had to have looked at Stockfish, because what person at my level would play that? Here, now I know a lot of times if you already have a queen on this file, I have a lot of opponents at my level that will put a bishop on one of those 2 squares knowing that the pawn is pinned, usually h6, because then if I move this pawn forward to stop checkmate, they get the rook for a bishop. But f6, that doesn't even point at the rook. Yeah, I can't fault them for not finding that, but what they found instead was not even their second best move. There might be other moves that were better than what they did find. What they did find was this. And what c3 does, and I didn't even realize this for a little while, is not only did we do a little pawn trade here and get rid of my doubled pawn, because I have a doubled pawn, but we get rid of this doubled pawn, and now guess what? I have 2 passed pawns now. I'm still only 1 pawn ahead, but 2 of them are passed, and none of them were passed before that. Before they move forward, none of these are passed pawns. This has a pawn in front of it. Both of these pawns are stoppable by their c-pawn. So they created 2 passed pawns with that little trade. And like I said, I didn't realize it, until quite some time later, but I was ahead the rest of the game because of that. In the 11th game, I think I might have just gotten lucky and something was happening on my opponent's end. Possibly, I'm guessing. Maybe their dad called them, maybe their child called them, I don't know. But they resigned here even though the game is relatively even. I'm up 0.75, which is kind of normal if both players have played well up to this point. Like, I had a slightly better move on the previous turn when I looked through this. After my opponent took that c-pawn, threatening my knight, I hopped it in here just to get it out of trouble, but it says I should have gone to b5 and I would have been up +1. I'm not sure why. Obviously, it points at the queen, but the queen would just move over to e7 or c6, probably a couple of other spots, but why does that put me up +1? I'm not sure. And I'm not even sure why they couldn't put it here on d7 and offer a queen trade. They have a whole, they have both knights guarding that square. Why not just go here? That would have been +1.5. Of course, we would have done the trade. It wouldn't have really mattered which knight they took back with, although it says the F knight is slightly better. And then I'm going to come after this other bishop and they're just going to move it. But so yeah, why am I up +2 here? I don't know. But yeah, so after this, for some reason, I would have been ahead if I had played knight to b5, but because I went over here, I'm not that far ahead, and they resigned. So like I said, this early in the game, with no obvious material differences, it's possible something happened on my opponents, and maybe, their teacher caught them in class playing chess. I have no idea. And this is the last of the 12 games. That's a lot of games. Hopefully I got all the right links and I got them all in the right order, and hopefully I didn't skip any, but it's possible. But this is the last one, and my opponent resigned after 17 moves. I'm up +6, even if they play their best move. And I'm not even up any material. My opponent is actually up a pawn here. Now, apparently it went wrong for them back on move 10, which was a blunder on my part. Before that, I was up, or at least a mistake, I guess, because I was up 1.6 here. If I would play knight to e4... I guess, is knight to e4 aiming for d6, which would be a check, and no, because their bishop's there. Sorry, I'm not sure why knight to e4 is so great, or I could have taken this pawn now. And that is something I'm wondering why I didn't do that, because in this Vienna opening, the Vienna game, that's often something that I do. But instead I played knight to d4, which is also something that I often do, attack the queen. That seems a lot like me. It also, revealed this attack. So depending on, I thought, where they moved the queen to get out of danger here, I might be able to pick off their bishop for free. I also thought they might take my bishop now, which would be threatening my queen. But I thought if they did that, then I would take their queen, and then they would take my queen, and then I would have this fork. So I thought I would come out slightly ahead on that. It says their best move is actually bishop to c5. This is their only move that keeps them, between +1 and -1, and that's because it pins that knight to my king. And that's why it was a blunder on my part to play that. But they didn't play bishop to c5. They took what looked to be like a free pawn. Well, it's not really a free pawn. For one thing, I'm going to get this, and I'm going to get this. I wasn't sure which one to take first. I thought about taking this one first, which Stockfish says taking on f4 is best. But I thought if that happened, we would get the same thing where they would also threaten my queen. So I took the bishop first, which is free, and I'm up a piece for a couple of pawns, right? They're still supposed to play bishop to c5 here. Their second best move is to take that bishop. The problem with that is it allows me to go here, and it's not even their best move to run away with the queen. That surprises me here. Their best move, according to Stockfish, is to get that knight out, but they did run away with their queen, which leaves their knight hanging. So I checked them first and then took the knight. So now I'm up, I'm still up a whole piece. 2 points of material, so that means that they've got an extra pawn somewhere, but I've got 3 minor pieces. They have 2 minor pieces, and all 3 of mine are out in the middle of the board. I don't know if that fully explains my +5 advantage here, and in fact, I just now realized nothing is defending this piece. And my opponent took it, and I'm in check, and I move out of check, and so now my opponent is up 1 point of material again, but somehow I'm up +5. So this is a little bit more confusing than I thought it was. They need to castle here or play knight to d7, which I had mentioned they don't have their pieces out, but they played g6, which gives me a mating sequence. Oh, and I'm just supposed to take that. Oh my. Well, I didn't see that, but I did see that I could threaten their queen and get it out of the way first. And after they got it out of the way, I missed a mate in 2 here. Oh my. We have so much to learn from this game, but I'm running out of time. Instead, I went here to put pressure on this pinned piece. Their best move is to castle, and of course, when they castle, I'm going to pick up the bishop, and then I would be ahead material. So that's wild that I missed a mate in 2, but I didn't even realize how far ahead I was because, again, my opponent is up material. But yeah, right here, I had that because they would have had to block with the queen. Only legal move would have been to block with their queen. And then I could have checkmated with the rook instead of the queen. That would have been a little bit shady, I guess, but I probably would have checkmated with the queen. Oh my goodness. Well, I'm glad I won all 12 of these, but as you can see, I still have work to do. I am going to try harder to not let so many games go by without me doing any analysis on them. It's lazy. It's lazy chessing. I know chessing's not a verb, but I really need to force myself to look back at each game just a little bit after it's over. Let me know what you're doing to get better at chess, or if you're getting better at chess. I would appreciate any comments, especially about things I misunderstood here on the screen. I went through pretty quickly. I know I missed some things. Thank you for spending your time here, and I'll see you next time.